Good morning. Now, statement 5 and 6. Statement 5 of the chapter on the Bodhisattva vows says, a transgression without afflictions is impossible. So a transgression hold on a second. Yeah, so a transgression without afflictions is impossible. Then the next statement, non-virtues that do not become faults are not permitted. Here it uses the English word permitted. We can say not recommended, never prescribed by the Buddha. The Buddha never advised us with the idea that there are non-virtues, that do not become problems, that do not become faults. Problems, faults means that. So a transgression without afflictions is impossible. So transgression is a translation of a technical term, and it's used in relation to discussing the various aspects of the Bodhisattva trainings. So after taking the Bodhicitta vow, there are different lists of trainings, such as like if you do 4 things, then you have damaged your Bodhicitta vow. And you should keep these 18 rules of training. And you should also keep the 46 complementing or supporting rules of training. So it's in the context of discussing those rules that this word transgression comes up. So again, somehow, in the rather intellectual academic discussions about these things, somehow, there is this idea that transgression is vocabulary used in relation to things that or discipline that you voluntarily take, and therefore some of these transgressions, since they are not by nature negative, but you voluntarily take them so that you can be more refined. All those transgressions, they are without afflictions. So there are views like this, Then, of course, Jigten Sumgon says, that's not possible. So this is very similar to statement 12, or based on the same idea of the last chapter, where it says, misdeeds and downfall, they are not different, but they are the same. So again, it's this statement here in chapter 4 in relationship to Bodhisattva trainings, and then statement 11 and 12, in fact. So 11, it says, the established and the natural misdeeds, they are the same. And misdeeds or vice and downfall are not different, but the same. Then 3:13, what is proscribed is always proscribed, and what is prescribed is always prescribed by the Buddha, recommended by the Buddha. What is discouraged by the Buddha is always discouraged. So it's based, this 4 5, and 4-6 is based on that same principle. So if we look at Khenpo Kunpal's commentary, he says in 4-5, moreover, regarding the bodhisattva vows, any of the root or branch transgressions that are without afflictions are impossible and do not exist. So the footnote here tells us, otherwise, the transgressions of the bodhisattva vows are asserted to be either with or without afflictions in terms of whether or not the transgressive action is motivated by afflictions or just turns out to be harmful. Meaning there are people who say, sometimes you can transgress. That means you can, basically you could say, go against your bodhisattva trainings. But there are cases where when you go against the training, it's not bad, it's not wrong. Because sometimes you can break those training not motivated by afflictions. However, so continuing in this footnote, Jigten Sumgon maintains that all transgressions of the bodhisattva vows are with afflictions. They are with afflictions. So here, the translator says, see Vajra Statement 315. 315 says, whichever being transgresses the rules of the Vinaya, that's a problem. That's a fault. That creates problem, for the individual, him or herself. So again, this 4-5, Khenpo Kunpal doesn't even elaborate any further because, it's basically saying, don't try to, have your divisions to be so sophisticated that you end up, creating non-virtue. It's like the definition of a transgression is it's done with the afflictions as motivation. Now, this can also mean it is hard for us, looking from the outside, to exactly know whether what that person is doing is a transgression or not. It also means that. And this means that we should not be so certain when we see somebody doing something wrong. We should not be so certain. We should not be so quick, to jump into conclusion and say, oh, definitely, this person has done something wrong. Now, having said that, if again and again, this person seems to be doing something that is not skillful, something that is not conducive to their own training, and if they are in a position of influence, in the position of being teachers, and their conduct is such that, it's causing people to lose confidence in Dharma, then what should we do? One thing I think is what we should do is, or what we should not do is, don't get sucked into people wanting you to take sides, to yell and scream. Yell and scream either way, like same time. This is my personal view about this matter. You yourself have to decide, I'm not saying this is what the Dharma says, but I am saying, based on my understanding of how to handle things like this. We should not get also recruited into like defending that person by like blaming the person that is complaining. Do neither of those things, because to do either of those things, you need to have real certainty. And it's hard, Sometimes it's even hard to understand our own motivations, right? When we do things. Sometimes it's even hard to understand our own motivations, whether it's sincere or not. And sometimes when we make mistakes, especially, we don't even know. Did I sincerely make that mistake, or, mistakenly made that mistake, So it's complicated. So here when it says, there can be no transgression that is not involving the afflictions. So one way to understand this statement is, don't like try to create a loophole, almost like a lawyer arguing a case in court, trying to create a loophole and say, well, there are transgressions that are not really involving the afflictions, and so bodhisattvas are allowed. So like ideas, bodhisattvas are allowed to kill, to steal, because, there are because these actions seemingly, it's a transgression of their bodhisattva training, but it's actually not. Because it's out of great compassion for all beings that they're doing this. Now, the statement can also be read as, if it is truly out of great compassion, then is it a transgression or not? Well, does it involve the afflictions or not? If it involves the afflictive emotions, then it's a fault. The next statement says that more clearly. So the example of that, or that we always use, Captain Compassion, it's a fault in that, the bodhisattva at that time did not yet have so much power and skill, which is to magically remove, the would-be murderer, right? Instead of killing, like airlift, the guy out of picture, The bodhisattva did not yet have that power. Now, was there a fault of self-interest involved in that, in what happened there? No. There was no self-interest. Even in doing the deed of killing the would-be murderer of 500 bodhisattvas, right? We know that there was no fault of self-interest. At that time, the bodhisattva was only thinking, really, of others. Elsewhere in some of these commentaries, it says that at that point, the bodhisattva had already achieved the level of realization where he understood that everything is mind only, that everything is the result of the mind. And therefore, everything we experience is only experienced within mind. That outside of mind, there is no further reality. So what that means there, in the commentaries when they say things like that, they're saying that although he was reborn in the hell realm, the way he experienced that suffering is very different from, like, say, you and I might be reborn in the hell realm. Forget about being born in the hell realm. Even in this realm, when you and I suffer, we don't understand, the suffering is only mind. Instead, right, for us, the suffering is very concrete, very real. And when we experience this suffering as very concrete and very real, often this becomes the conditions of creating more suffering. Whereas when the Bodhisattva was reborn in the hell realm, as a result of killing that person, the would-be murderer, because the Bodhisattva has already realized everything is mind. So even though objectively you could say the Bodhisattva was in hell realm, subjectively, due to the power of his realization, it was a different kind of existence in the hell realm. That is not exactly like yours and mine. Also, then, the take-home lesson is, you cannot say, like, oh, I'm going to be like Captain Compassion. Right now here, even like, getting a paper cut, right? It's a lot easier in winter when the air is very dry, and your skin is very dry, Even getting a paper cut, is not only in the mind. You're like, I should have put some lotion, who asked me to change the computer paper? Normally it's not my job. It's that person's fault. I got a paper cut. So even a small paper cut, we are like agitated. Then all this talk about, is only in the mind. Can you imagine, being in a state of a hell being? Not so easy. That, this is only mind. So which means, most of us, all of us probably cannot do that kind of activity. So here, 4.5 doesn't get a lot of further comment from Khenpo Kunpal. 4.6, let's look at 4.6. Furthermore, regarding the transgressions with afflictions, like fire without heat is impossible, non-virtues that do not become faults are also impossible. Because by definition, why is that even a non-virtue? Because it's a non-virtue. And so here is important, right? It's a non-virtue not because Buddha says so. Buddha has made it a rule. Why? Well, because Buddha has the power to create and undo whatever he wants to create or uncreate. So this is the God thinking, the God-based system. Yeah, is something good or bad because naturally, intrinsically, it's good or bad? Most God-based system will say, no, it's because God made it so. So God can change the rules anytime. Here, in our system, it's not like that. It's not because the Buddha says so, but rather the Buddha understood it to be so and then taught it to us in that way. That this is just how things are, how things work, the natural working of things. And so by definition, something is a non-virtue, or here we're saying, something is a non-virtue. Actions of body, speech, and mind are considered non-virtue when they arose due to any combination of the poisons, of the afflictive emotions, of the mental defilements. And because of that, right, then no need to study this text and that text so much. You immediately know, oh, that's a non-virtue. And if it is a non-virtue, of course, it will cause problems, which is how the more technical as the translation is, become false. It will become a problem. Sometimes big, sometimes small, depending on this, what kind of non-virtuous actions have been created, right? Sometimes big, sometimes small. Sometimes how big or small also depends on how soon the full effects all come together. Maybe immediately small, then the big consequence will come later. Maybe immediately very big, and then there's the residual consequence that continues, and drags on. And the scariest thing about non-virtue turning into suffering and suffering unfolding. Yeah, the scarier thing, the more problematic thing about non-virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind in whatever combination, bearing the result of suffering. And when suffering is going on, taking place, it becomes a fertile place for further non-virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind to be created. Again, when we are in a happy, contented, really at ease, mind has calmed down, meaning everything is good and happy, that is a fertile ground for the growing of more virtuous actions. When our mind and our body is not in harmony, when the mind is agitated, when the mind is disturbed, when the mind is under the power of the mental defilements, as a result, the body becomes ill at ease, the body begins to suffer. Then as the body suffers, the mind becomes more rigid, more tense, more tight. Right? Then that's the samsara that is going on, started in the mind, seemingly affecting the body, seemingly now affecting the mind. That's the korwa, right? That's the round, that's the circle. Then it chases itself, dog chasing its own tail. It goes on and 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 on. The opposite of this scenario is when body is in a good place, mind is in a good place, heart is in a good place, then it's in the place of happiness. Then very naturally, we are capable of being generous, we are capable of being forgiving, we are capable of being patient with others, we're capable of being patient with ourselves, we're capable of being forgiving to others, we're capable of being forgiving to ourselves. All of that, we stop beating ourselves, we stop beating other people because everything is good. But that everything is good, don't just accidentally happen. And the point is we can create those conditions, and we should create those conditions. And therefore, a real affliction is never permitted for anyone. The Buddha never said, oh, you are advanced bodhisattvas. You're allowed. It's like saying you're allowed to harm yourself. There's no allowing or disallowing, even to ask, is this allowed? Is this permitted? Already we We don't understand already, you know. Sometimes I said, you know, I've said in the past, I said, you know, I said, when I'm in Asia, sometimes, you know, before, now not so much because they don't ask me to so much talk to young people, you know. But sometimes, you know, people will ask, you know, young people especially, you know, are Buddhists allowed to do this or allowed to do that? The usual questions, you know. You know, are Buddhists allowed to drink or not allowed to drink? Are Buddhists allowed this or not allowed that? Are Buddhists, you know, blah, blah, blah. Because other religions have opinions, you know, and usually very clear, you know, opinions, you know. God doesn't allow you to drink, or God allows you to drink, you know. God doesn't allow you to have relationships outside of marriage, or God doesn't care, or, you know, all kinds of, you know, God says you have to wear this, you cannot wear that, you know. God says you have to behave this way and not that way. So young people like to ask. In the past, when I was also younger, I like to kind of shock people, you know. I said, Buddhists are allowed to do whatever they want to do. You know, whatever you want to do, of course you're allowed to do. It's just that whatever you do produces consequences. So you are ready for the consequences or not? You know, that's all. Are Buddhists allowed to, you know, bang their head against the wall? Well, if you want to do that, you go ahead, you know. The Buddha is not in the business of allowing or disallowing. He's, you know, maybe you should ask the wall, am I allowed to bang my head against you? Yeah? If the wall can speak, the wall will say, well, doesn't really make a difference to me, but it will probably hurt you. But then if you say, actually, I have discovered, like if I bang my head against you, my headache actually goes away. Well, then I suppose it's allowed. It's allowed until, right, you bang the wall so much that you damage the wall. Now there are consequences to damaging the wall. You have to repair the wall. That's all. So asking questions like, you know, are Buddhists allowed or not allowed? Wrong way of framing the question. It would be, you know, what are the causes and effects, you know, that the Buddha have taught with regards to this kind of action, this kind of action, this kind of action, this kind of action? And what are all the layers of causes and results? So again, as I said, you know, the Vinaya, the section of the Vinaya where the individual pratimoksha rules for the fully ordained monks and nuns have very detailed causes and effects being demonstrated. Not always, you know, explain why, but demonstrated, because there are many stories there. And from there, you know, we can get understanding of what is the underlying principle. Potentially, not always possible. I've read them. Not always possible. And not always possible because, also my own experience, we ourselves can't quite get it yet. You have more life experience, you have more practice experience, then you read it again and you go, oh, I see, that's how, you know. And so here it says, therefore, if it is an affliction, then, there's no occasion, there's no situation where the Buddha says to someone, you're allowed to bang your head against the wall. The reasoning is stated in the Sutra of True Magical Speech. Involuntarily, the ripening results of karma occur. The exalted Buddha cannot control it. So whether you like it or not, when the conditions come together for a particular karma to ripen, it will occur. Even Buddhas cannot block that. Much less, the likes of you and me. Well, why then are the 7 non-virtuous activities of the body and speech taught to be permitted in the skillful means of the great secret and so forth? Where, for example, Captain Great Compassion, Mahakaruna, killed and it did not become a fault. Now Khenpo Kunpal, will answer it. May or may not reflect our usual Drikung answer. Let's see. A bodhisattva who has mastered cherishing others more than himself due to his realization of emptiness and compassion, and who has abandoned benefiting himself and strives only to benefit others, experiences the results of such actions, but wears the best armor of patience. So this explanation is similar to what I said, the bodhisattva is experienced the result of being born in that hell realm. But because he has the armor of patience, patience here is not just like blind patience, but with understanding, and that's why there is patience. But this such a bodhisattva has this armor of patience. For those bodhisattvas, such actions are permitted, but not for others. Here, I think I would say, it's not that it's permitted, again, It's just that in their case, they can handle it. It's not that the Buddha permitted it. Is that they can handle it. Like my example of banging your head against the wall. Or, my statement of are Buddhists allowed to ... Well, you're allowed to do whatever you want to do. But are you ready for the consequences of your actions? Through their display of skillful means, they can also perfect their accumulation of merit and wisdom. Jigten Sumgon said that when one has understood this point, it is profoundly important to make one's conduct fit with the time and environment. It is like when an old fox jumps where a lion can jump, and the old fox breaks its back. Thus, it is important not to mix one's conduct with non-virtue. And so quickly, Khenpo Kunpal. And Khenpo Kunpal's explanation is a little bit more similar to the mainstream explanation. But then he also knows that Jigten Sumgon will caution and say, but at all, if at all possible, it's best to avoid non-virtue. And so quickly, Khenpo Kunpal, I feel, insert this and say, because his initial, his main explanation of 4.6 is he's saying, the advanced beings are allowed. But then he said, but Jigten Sumgon also said, it's profoundly important that your conduct fit with the time, with the environment, with the situation. So this is in 4.6. So overall, 4.5 and 4.6 is basically, to me, is basically saying that first of all, we should not estimate the way in which the mental defilements, the afflictive emotions, can influence our actions. Particularly, I think, when you factor in, in Vajrayana especially, right? Such things like devotion to the Guru. And then if you, hear, the Guru says, we have to go do this, to oppose this, to protest that, to help, remove someone who is causing harm in the world. Oh, be very careful, I think you and I are not going to run into situations, with organizations or gurus who literally will tell you to go harm someone. I don't think our Buddhist community has gone to that point. But seemingly less scary situations are like, do this practice or that practice, to remove, this person causing problem. Actually, you're not harming them, you're helping them, or be careful, I would say don't get involved in these sorts of things. Because we are so far from, being able to even have any idea, of what Captain Compassion was doing. Back again to, ask yourself, when you get a paper cut, when your big plans for the weekend, your big plans to have friends and family over for a big party and everything, got canceled because, somebody did something stupid or whatever it is, your neighbor's tree, which you have been telling them for weeks, they should cut it down because it's leaning on the power station and the power pole, and then they didn't do anything, and it fell and it crushed, and then now your big weekend reunion that you have planned for the last year, you have not seen people, all needs to be canceled. Forget about saving 500 bodhisattvas, forget about taking the person out because you don't want the person to suffer a consequence of killing 500 bodhisattvas. Something like your party got messed up already. I am sure, I don't know about you, but I think most of us will be very upset. So we should understand, like mental defilements result in non-virtuous actions. Non-virtuous actions ripen as the experience of suffering. Bodhisattva vow or not, first we need to understand that basic principle. Then true, as your bodhisattva vow, as your bodhicitta vow becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, then you like Captain Compassion. So part of that story of Captain Compassion is, if he did not intervene at all, and instead he just said, you know what? Not my karma, not my business. Right? I didn't ask that person to do this. I didn't contribute to it. I'm not going to get involved. Now, I know whether you agree or you don't agree, you have to understand the basic karmic principle. In terms of like karma, right? Not doing something is not literally, not doing something is a fault Not doing something like not intervening, right? In that situation is a kind of fault, yes, but it is not the fault of not stopping someone from killing 500 people. It's not the fault of killing 500 people. Do you understand that part? It is a fault of a different type, as far as karma goes. In our common, these days people say, if you don't do something, then you are part of the problem. From the perspective of understanding karmic causality, yes, but it's too imprecise. It might seem like you're saying you were responsible for killing the 500 people. No. The fault of not intervening is the fault of cherishing self more than others. That's the fault. So in that Captain Compassion story, if the Bodhisattva did not intervene, right, he will not suffer the fault of either killing 500 or killing the one, killing the murderer. But what fault would he have created? The fault of self-cherishing. And that fault would have prevented him from achieving Buddhahood under the Bodhi tree 2,500 or so years ago and becoming our Buddha Shakyamuni. It might have taken him longer. It might have taken him longer if he chose self-cherishing at that point. Does this make sense? So today we stop here.